It's gonna be F, and it's never leaving this spot. I fucking hate this tower. So today I'm gonna do a tier list for every cross path, or I guess every tier 5 tower in Bloons Tower Defense 6. I have, I think, close to 250 hours in the game, so I have experience, so I know what I'm talking about. And this tier list isn't going to be based on boss fights or chimps or anything. It's going to be based on an over-encompassing role. So if a tower is terrible in boss fights but amazing in chimps, it won't go in S or F. It might go in the middle. Ooh. All right. Number one is the biggest one. So this is Mortar Monkey. It's the top cross path, and I'm gonna rate it a solid. I'm gonna rate it a solid B. It's pretty good in chimps. It's useless in boss fights. You can use it in races, I imagine, but overall, it's just not a tower I use a lot. I think there's better options, and you can get bang for buck. It is useful for two tower chimps, although unless you're like trying to go for a record, what's the point of doing two tower chimps? I'd rate it a B. I'm not gonna rate it lower just because it is useful. It's not too expensive, and it is a fun tower. Apache helicopter. Ooh, this is hard. I'm actually gonna rate this an A. Here's why. I know a lot of people are gonna hate this. One, it's a very cool tower. Two, building up to that cross path is very cheap and can hold up to like wave 50 on its own. So for chimps, it's like a very cheap option. Three, the tier 5 tower is also very cheap and you get your bang for your buck for it. And you don't have to micro the tower that much. Also, it does a lot of AoE damage. Not to mention, for boss battles, is obviously not. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend it's very useful, but it can increase your damage drastically. This has to be an S tier. That's what is that? That's not Wizard of Phoenix. That's Archmage something. It's the top path for Wizard Monkey. For those of you who don't know, this top path automatically gets camo detection, so you can just go Fireball if you want more damage. I mean, middle path. It's a very strong tower. It can solo to a high wave. For boss fights, I have to say it is useful just because one, is going to do a shit ton of damage. Two, it's going to clear all the DDTs and whatnot. And three, it's also gonna. And not only does it decamo because it has the shimmer effect, but it also builds into a paragon. Now, I'm not gonna account for that because I think that would be unfair. Because then, like, even the Dart Monkey would be S tier. However, this would be an S regardless, in my opinion. Jude of the Wrath. I'm gonna rate this an A. Actually, no, I can't. It has to be an S. This tower is just way too strong. I don't use it that much because I hate like cluttering the board and spending too much time fighting a wave. But for boss fights, it's an absolute must. I mean, it'll clear like tier 2, tier 3 of every boss fight. Almost, I think. For chimps, I don't really see people use that often because it does need buffs like Alchemist or what's it called? It needs a setup with Pop Lust and it needs camo detection. However, if we're rating it as a tower, it's pretty cheap. The setup isn't that hard to do and it's extremely effective. Not to mention with certain heroes, it's got great synergy. I mean, oh yeah, if you put him with Orban, what's his name? Obor, what's his name? I keep forgetting his name because I don't use this hero. Yeah, Oben. I never use that hero. If you put him with Oben, he's insane. All right, 500 Banana Farm, arguably the strongest banana farm in the game. Actually, I think it is. Has to be S tier. Biggest money generation. Buffs all other farms. Um, there's nothing else to say. It's the best way to make money in the game. Especially for boss fights, what most people do is like by tier 3, they sell all the other farms and just go into that because it just out generates all those other farms. So this is 500. Ooh. Okay, this is 500 cannon. Now, before this shit would probably be a D. I mean, it used to be kind of a useless tower. No one would go with because what's the point? However, now it legitimately is S tier because, for those of you who don't know, not only does it stun like balloons, obviously, but it knocks them back, right? So you just can create an endless funnel if you give this tower Pierce with the Monkey Village. Um, Camo detection, obviously, you have to give it frags. You can do Alchemist, whatever it is. You can literally hold off waves forever. It's a great stall mechanic. Overall, just a phenomenal tower, and it does a lot of damage. They made this tower so much better than it used to be. I think it was the perfect patch for it. This is a 005 Alchemist. Ooh, okay. Here's the thing. With Alchemists, things get complicated. Why do they get complicated? Let me see what I can say here. Alchemist has to be S tier. Here's why. For those of you who don't know, this guy every couple seconds just throws out like a little fucking nuke that just turns a Moab, like the biggest Moab on screen, to a red balloon. So if you use him, he'll end up getting more pops than your damn Paragons because he just like one shots Moabs. It's a gimmick monkey. It's relatively unreliable. However, it is way too cheap for what it can do, and the pops it can get on it are crazy. Just raw damage output is phenomenal. You're never gonna really use him in chimps. I mean, I don't even know if you could afford him in chimps, like with the proper setup. He's a fun tower in general use. He's great. You're never gonna really use him in boss events because you kind of want pops on your paragons to make them stronger. But in terms of just as a tower, he's strong. Actually, no. Now that I think about it, considering that there's not too many situations where you can use him, right? Because in chimps you need to have like a proper defense, and it can get expensive to wait for him. Not to mention he can't really clear the lower clutter. I might have to actually bring him down. I might have to bring down OB because he's kind of in the same position as the. Actually, no, he might have to go lower. Because the biggest one is very useful compared to this. Actually, I'm gonna move the biggest one up because I feel like now that I'm like remembering a little bit, it's a very strong tower, especially because of Bernie damage. And him and this alchemist, while it's very powerful, I just can't think of that many situations where you have to use him or you can even use him. Maybe I'm wrong though. Bernie stuff S tier. It does way too much fucking damage. It destroys fortified. It removes camo. It's a great utility tower. It's way too cheap for how much it does, or maybe it's cheap enough. Who knows? The damage on it is crazy. The Bernie damage on it is insane. One of my favorite towers in the game, just because you just set it and you don't gotta move. Recursive. Ooh. Hmm. Let me think about this for a second. Where would I put recursive? Realistically, where would I put recursive? Because here's the thing. Here's the thing. A 004 recursive cluster, right? That one, phenomenal tower. Useful, cheap, great. When you go to 005, you don't get that much for how much you spend, right? Like people just go double recursive or triple recursive. They don't really go to the tier 5 path. I rarely see it. I rarely use it. I think utility wise it just doesn't exist. The defense mechanic on it is nice, how like it attacks every balloon on the board. So for that reason, I think I'll give it a C. And you might be thinking, wait, if it like does damage to all the balloons on the board and can save you from a loss, why would you give it a C? We'll get into that in a minute. Absolute Zero, S tier. It's a very cheap tower. It literally is like a free pause mechanic where you can still do damage to towers. Obviously, you need to have a little bit of setup. And it can help you drop things on water, which on maps where there's a lot of water, it can save you because farms and whatnot. This might be controversial. This boomer might be controversial. I mean, boomerang. So this is Glaive Lord Dominus, or is it just Glaive Lord? I don't know, man. I'm not good with names. This is 500. I think it's S tier, man. Look, this tower, the tier 5 path costs like 35 grand, right? And it can hold off so many waves. You can go if you go top path, it's gonna tear through all the clutter. You just need to buff it. If you go like 520, if you go 502, you don't even need to give it anything because it has automatic camo detection. Even for phase, by the way, phase can't even destroy its automatic camo detection. Phase can't even destroy its automatic damage. Whoa. Phase can't even destroy its automatic camo detection, even though it doesn't have like a camo icon, because tier 5 just has it for some reason. And if you go 502, it can hit everything. It's a great tower. It can destroy anything. Obviously, it's like weak, so late game it's not gonna be the most useful, and there's like a pierce limit. But just it's so cheap. It's a fun tower. If you put him in like in a corner where there's a bunch of balloons circling, it'll one shot. However, I do have to bring it down one now that I realize it, because it's only useful on maps where there's like intertwining paths, or where there's paths where like balloons have to constantly go around one area. If it's like a straight line, the utility kind of gets mitigated. And even though that's like, if we're being honest, like it cuts out half the maps. The reason why it's still gonna be A, because what's it called? The 400 path, the bouncing boomerang, I think it's called. I don't know. That's very useful for most boss fights, for balloon areas, for wave 63 and whatnot. Carpet Spikes S tier, cheap tower, can clear the whole map. You don't gotta worry about it. It's strong as hell. You can beat like phase with Carpet of Spike spam when it came out. I think ISAB did it. I watched this great video. Just a strong tower, cheap as hell. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's useful on every map. You can go for it in chimps too and boss fights. It's very cheap. Ooh, S tier. Again, it's a cheap tower. I think it costs like 30 grand. It can hit everything in the game. It's got great pierce. It can be buffed by a cheap ninja, cheap village to like kind of double its damage almost. Just very strong. It doesn't need setup. And with monkey knowledge, you can get two. Elite sniper. I'm honestly tempted to put him in F, bro. This is my favorite tower in the game, but it just feels so weak. Like it's good from like wave 1 to like 50 or something. Like it can't even beat wave 63 on its own, even if you go like 205. The way it used to work was the tier 5 path for bottom path would give it automatic lead popping, so you could go 025 and it would still pop lead. And at that point, it was like probably one of the like strongest, cheapest towers in the game. But then they removed it. So if we're not taking into account buffs, I think it's kind of a shit tower. If we are taking account into buffs, then obviously it'd be like A or something. But then all these other towers would be higher as well. I'm not taking that into account. I think it's a pretty useless tower. It's good early. You can beat most boss fights like their first and second phase utilizing it, and it's cheap. But besides that, I don't like it. And even then, when I say it's cheap, I think realistic is like 25 grand, which is kind of a lot because the last path is like 15 grand. The one before that's like 4.25. The one before that's like 3 something. So I don't know. Elite Sniper has to be S tier. I think it's the strongest sniper. The targeting on it, the targeting prior on it is great. It generates money. It buffs all the other snipers. It's it's actually very cheap as well, and it brings you money back, so it's not like it's a negative tower. Plus, it'll hit camo and it'll pop lead. It's just a tower you don't have to worry about. Uh, what is this? 500 sub. Um, okay. This might be a little controversial. It's a strong tower on its own. It's gonna get a lot of pops, obviously. But the reason why I would rate it higher is just because it's passive. It gives higher XP. It gives lower cooldowns. If you're going for a run where you want to get a high wave, you kind of need this tower. For boss fights, it's not very useful in my opinion, unless you're going for like a weird setup where you need like actives, or you're running like uh I don't know, you want to get like Geraldo level 20 way earlier. But in my opinion, it's just a good tower. It's cheap. It does damage, and it's kind of one of those set and forget it. Plus, it's a water tower, right? Ooh, now that I think about it, it's a water tower, which means on a lot of maps it's not going to be useful. So can I rate it an S? I think I have to, just because it's utility. I'm not going to talk about this. I'm pretty sure this is the strongest tier 5 tower in the game, and its Paragon is the strongest in the game. This is an unbalanced tower, and I don't want them to fix it because, bro, if I'm ever stuck on a boss fight, I just drop this motherfucker down with his Paragon, he just wins the game. But yeah, this is for those you don't know, it's a 005 Ace, the strongest tower in the game. Glue Strike, B tier. It's a good buff. It's not really that useful. You don't really need it anymore. I mean, I know they're gonna be like, oh, with the Glue Strike, you can beat every boss. Yeah, you can use Glue Strike on everything. It's very cheap, but I would rate the I would rate the 050 version probably B and the 040 probably S because the 040 is way cheaper and it kind of does the same thing. You don't really need the +1 damage. If you think you do, then you don't know what you're doing. The towers in this game are so power crept that like you can beat anything with a damn randomizer. Hell, you could beat most boss fights without even a Paragons or even a Vengeful God. Obviously, like normal. Elite is a little crazy. But there are ways. I'm gonna rate this guy. Ooh, I like the way it's like a circle. Damn, that looks nice. I'm gonna rate this guy a solid B. Look, again, the 040 version of this monkey, because this is the 050. The 040 is way more, it does the same thing, but it's way cheaper and way more spammable. This tower itself, it's good, but I don't really find myself using it that much. And I can't include Paragon talk because if I want to talk about like the Paragon and the pops, and it would probably be S tier, and that's not fair to all the rest of the towers, right? Quality, equity, whatever. So I'm gonna have to rate it a B. If this was a damn tier 4, like tier 4 tier list, it'd probably be S because the tier 4 is phenomenal. The tier 5 you don't really need, and it's like 45 grand or some shit. S, phenomenal tower, bro. You take this tower by itself, it does crazy damage. If you use its like, if you combine it with like the okay, wait, actually no, it's got to be A. Here's why it's A. I was about to say, if you give him the Pierce with the 040 or 030 Ninja Monkeys, and you give it an Alchemist, it's like one of the strongest towers in the game. But again, buffs are not fair. However, by itself, I think it's still a phenomenal tower. It's a fun tower. It's got Seeking, and it does a lot of damage, and it helps clear. So I have to give it an A. Okay, all the villages are gonna be S tier, and I think I'll just do them now. Where's the next village? And I'll explain why they're all S tier. Okay, This village, the first one, the 500 primary mentor, it buffs all the primary monkeys, makes them incredibly strong, right? Cool. Second, by itself, it does a fuck ton of damage. You know how this elite sniper can't clear wave 63? This guy murders wave 63. It does a lot of damage. It's a cheap tower. It buffs everything. It gives you free upgrades, which makes making paragons, even though I don't want to talk about paragons, it makes having paragon upgrades easier. This tower is a money making machine, even if we're not including farms and we're just doing a 005 with no farms, which why would you ever even? I don't even think it's possible, right? So we have to include one farm. You're making like 1,400 a round, which I think is the highest you can make with any tower around. That's not like a tier 5 farm. Beyond that, it's cheap, and even if you don't go full bottom fat, it's a discount village and the 10,000 upgrade that gives all your monkeys like in its range extra gold per pop. Uh, it's a very powerful mechanic, and it kind of just doubles all the money you're earning for the rest of the game as long as you keep those monkeys in that range. Homeland defense. I mean, if a tower is called Homeland Defense, you have to imagine your homeland's gonna be defended. And for those of you who don't know what this does, when you click it, it gives all monkeys on the screen double pop, double speed, all that stuff. Just buffs the fuck out of them. It's an incredibly powerful tower. It's pretty cheap for what it does, and since it buffs everything and not just everything in its range, it makes it an S. If this tower only buffed things in its range, it'd probably still be an S just because all you gotta do is like put your paragons and your damn tier 5 is near it, but it's a phenomenal tower, and most people utilize this with druids. And these guys, as you know, are broken. Okay. A 005 Ice Monkey. I'm gonna rate it A, and I hate that I have to rate it A because in my heart, this guy's an S tier, but I have to rate him A. It's my favorite tower in the game. It looks cool as shit. It's got a great design. The attack looks nice. The art, like everything about it, I love it. It's just not that useful. Like okay. No, that's a lie. Actually, this guy can hold off so much on its own, and it's very cheap. Fuck. Now that I think about it, maybe I do put him in S. It's a super cheap tower, and it can do a lot. It's S. It's S. I don't care what anyone says. This tower's amazing. If you don't like it, you're probably blind and you're playing off sound or something. This is a what is this? 500. It has to be S. The monkey aces are just really strong, man. This tower, with the recent update, I think it got a little weaker, just like based on some stats. But it's basically a map wide tower. It does a lot of damage to Moabs. If you just give it camo detection, it'll tear apart anything. It's obviously weak to purple balloons, but then again, that's like most towers in the game. Purple balloons are a unique mechanic, and even then, I think you can still kill purple balloons because I don't think purple leads exist. Maybe they do. I don't know. This is not Apache Prime. What is this called? Let me actually Google it. Yeah, Comanche Commander. So this is the bottom path for helicopter monkey, whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna rate it a solid B. Actually no. Wait, wait. Okay, here's why it's S tier. Moab Shove is a broken mechanic. This monkey, this tower itself just does a fuck ton of damage, and it can clear like lead. It's got missiles, it's got AOE. Um, it's a cheap tower, relatively speaking. It's a cheap tower, but what makes it an S tier, I think, is the Moab Shove. Actually, no, A tier. I just realized it's not really that cheap. It's like 45 grand for the last upgrade. And Moab Shove is a tier 3 upgrade, so I can't really account for that. I'd say it's A tier. Ooh. I'd have to, yeah, A tier is fair. Kylie Boomerang, S tier, Broken Tower. Stops Moabs, has an exploding attack, has, I think, almost global range. Is obviously weak against like ceramics and shit like that, but he's not going to be your only tower. Ring of Fire, S tier. Uh, Almost nothing can get past it. It's got a meteorite attack that chases. It does a lot of damage. It's very cheap, and it's a really, I think it's probably one of their coolest design towers in the game. Legend of the Night, S tier. This is why I put, where is it? Where is it? This is why I put recursive here, because if you really wanted a tower that can stop you from losing, realistically, you're probably in late game and you would never take recursive over a Legend of the Night. It can go map wide, it can hit everything, it's got insane damage. I think probably, I don't know if it's the highest. Well, it's obviously not the highest super monkey damage because Sun God exists, whatever. But it can go map wide. It can stop you from losing, and it's literally Batman. And I'm not gonna put Batman in anything other than S tier because I'm not trying to get jumped by a bunch of DC fanboys. All right. S. Ooh, no, actually, legitimately B tier. And let me explain why. The tier 4 path S tier, right? But the tier 5 path has just always felt so fucking underwhelming, dude. Like you would think a tower that does 1,000 damage to every mob on screen every time they show up would have a lot of damage, but the simple truth is it just doesn't. And there's no reason to spend 40 grand on it besides trying to get pops for a Paragon, which again we can't include Paragon in this discussion. Otherwise, it'd probably be S. But the tier 4 path is an S tier. The tier 5 path, you're spending 40 grand to honestly do less damage than if you just dropped three C4 monkeys over this guy. Moab Cripple S tier, broken thing, stops mobs from moving. If you go Shrapnel, it stops all of them from moving. It gives like +5 damage to all of the towers when it hits them. It's a phenomenal tower. It's amazing. S tier as well. If you're ever struggling with boss fights, just use this guy. He's pretty cheap, or like his tier 4 ones. He does a lot of damage. He's a fun tower to use, and he's never not useful. Although I'm gonna give him A tier. Actually, I'm gonna reduce it to A. Oh fuck it, actually fuck it, B tier. B tier makes sense. The reason why is because he kind of falls off. Like late game, he's kind of taking up a tower slot, which like if you had to, for example, let's say like your map is filled with towers, you're trying to go to like wave 1,000 or something. If you have a choice between having him on your screen or having like a sun god, you would just take the sun god over him anyways because the damage is way more consistent and it's not based on ability. However, for boss fights, he's very useful early on. For chimps, he's not really useful. You're not gonna ever use this guy. But it's a cool tower, which I guess puts it in B. It serves its purpose, right? You use him for a boss fight, then you sell him and you build a couple farms. Oh, where are the monkey farms? Yep, this is my favorite tower in the game. I think I use it the most. It's just it's bottom patch. So you don't need to spend fucking click. You don't gotta play farming simulator while trying to play balloons. You could just put this down. It collects the money for you. You ain't gotta worry about it. You ain't gotta worry about your taxes. Your accountant handle it, whatever, right? But even better, it collects money from around you. So what I usually do is in like if I'm doing a boss fight, which is where you usually drop a shit ton of farm towers. I'll drop this guy. Then I'll surround it with. I'll drop one of this right next to him. I'll have my damn monkey farm right next to that, and then I'll have a couple of the BFBs right next to that, and it'll just collect everything for me. I don't gotta drop a farmer. I don't gotta worry about nothing. It's phenomenal. I love it. Bank A tier because you have to micromanage it, and if you don't micromanage it, then you're actually losing so much money that it's almost not worth having. Um, Although you do get 10 grand around, but it's just the setup for it costs a lot. You need the right hero, you need the right setup, you got to funnel money into it. I don't find myself using it that much. I think it's more of a hassle. However, I'd be bullshitting if I sat here and pretended like it wasn't a useful tower. As and also, I'm pretty sure it's the strongest early game farming strategy. Although you have to micro it a lot. S tier tower, I don't care what anyone says. Super cool, does a fuck ton of damage. I'm pretty sure you could solo chimps with this guy if you just gave him a buff. Uh, I don't use him in bosses. I'd be lying if I said I did, but that's also because like Paragons exist, and if Paragons didn't exist, I would be using him. So I have to put him in S. Perma Spike S tier. Guys, this thing costs like 30 grand and it can stop like wave 100 almost. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I'm talking about my ass. It's a great tower. It does a lot of damage. Obviously, it's super cheap. If this was like 70 grand or some shit, it'd probably be like B tier. Because what's the point? But it's like I think it's like probably the cheapest. Is it not the cheapest damn spike tower? Yeah, 100% is the cheapest. So you gotta be up there. Alchemist S tier. Buffs everyone. Monkey S tier. It can just suck in mobs, gives you extra cash, does a lot of damage, and the cooldown is really low. F tier. No one uses this tower, and if you're gonna sit here and tell me you do, you're bullshitting. Um. Where do I put this thing, man? Okay. A tier, it pops black balloons. It's got a really fast attack speed, does a lot of damage. It's kind of map dependent, but it has an ability that kind of stuns everything on the screen, which makes it very useful. Combine that with an energizer, and got yourself magic. A tier. It's great to kill off bads, and a lot of people use it for chimps. This is a what is this? A five? No, it's not a 5-0. It's a 050 monkey sub. Useful tower. I like it. It's very cheap. I think it's like 14 grand for the final upgrade. Does a lot of damage. But you really only use it for like a handful of games. It's not really a priority. Shredder, D tier, F tier, fucking useless tower. I swear. Okay, now So for those of you who don't know, Shredder is actually very good against most boss fights. If you go top path like 300 or 400, it can just tear through the bosses, especially for phase. So for that reason, I give it a C. But let's be honest for a second, if Paragons did not exist, you would never use this tower. Not a single one of you would be using this dog shit tower. You need to buff it so... Bro, you gotta put fucking TRT and steroids under this motherfucker to make him useful, alright? And don't get me started on chimps. No one's using him for chimps. He's useless. He costs... I don't know, man. Paragons didn't exist. This motherfucker would be in the closet like Harry Potter. Necromancer Monkey, S tier. It's so cheap, and it'll just hold on. It'll just keep you protected for like the 1,000 waves. It's a very cheap tower. It's an easy chimp strategy. It's an easy early game defense strategy. And I mean, it's a cool tower, I guess. Yeah, why not? It gives other Necromancer monkeys a buff, although it's counterproductive almost. S plus Chinook. You can move towers around on the game without having to sell them. Alright, if you know anything about the game, you know that's a very important mechanic. 2, it generates a lot of money, so it pays itself off. It's borderline a free tower. 3, for some reason, this damn monkey in here, bro, that got a damn minigun. Yeah, that minigun has kryptonite in it or something, or plutonium, I guess, because it shreds. I'm dying. It shreds balloons. It shreds balloons. All right, it's a great tower. There's a lot of S's now that I think about it. S tier. Generates money, clears the whole field, can hit everything including camo and lead, has no counter, is 35 grand. B. It's strong, it takes a lot of setup, I don't really see myself using it. It's got weaknesses, would they be lead or camo, so you do have to buff it. S tier. Removes camo, lead, all those regrow properties, boosts your damage nearly double. Great tower, looks cool, looks like a Yeti. B tier. The 023 is stronger than the 025. Change my mind, you can't. F tier, no one uses this tower, don't lie. B tier, one of the strongest towers in the game, way too fucking expensive so no one uses it. B tier, one of the strongest towers in the game, way too fucking expensive so no one uses it. B tier, one of the strongest towers in the game, way too expensive so no one uses it. Ah, no, that's bullshit. It's probably an S tier. Even it's like the tier 4 path is strong. It can clear the board. It's strong. S tier. I don't care what anyone says. Tower costs like 30 grand total and will save your fucking life. It glues everything. It does damage to everything. It tears through everything. It's great cleanup, and it's probably the coolest tower for Glue Gunner. And that's not that hard to be. I mean, it's Glue Gunner. Tax Zone recently got a buff. A tier. Bro, look, it's good on... No, it's got to be B tier. It's good on certain maps. C tier, actually. It's got a lot of weaknesses. It's a little too expensive early. It's good on certain maps. It's terrible on most. It's good for boss fights, some of them, but even in most boss fights, you're not even going tax zone. You're usually going 0... Like, you're going, like, 204 or 024 or whatever. I have to rate this an F because no one uses this monkey at all unless there's a glitch. And when there was the glitch, and this was like the most broken tower in the game, everyone was using him. I have to give him S because it's a glitched. Fuck, did I fuck up? Oh, thank God, I went back on accident. Yeah, it's a glitch tower, so it has to be this. S tier, great money making machine, has great synergy with farms, is great for water maps. It can just save you early like a 024 or 023, whatever, because it'll generate money and it'll just clear all waves. It's weak to purple balloons, but so are half the towers in the game, so I'm not going to use that against it. Sun God, F. I know what you're thinking. Did you just rate the objective strongest tower in the game F? Yeah, you know what? It is the objective strongest tower in the game. But guess what? Guess what? It gets beaten by most paragons. So you can sit down and tell yourself, yeah, I'm gonna spend close to $1.5 million to make a vengeful sun god and have a very strong tower, or I could just spend $1 million on an ace paragon who will fucking destroy this thing based on damage and global. And guess what? You ain't gotta buff the ace paragon. But even if paragons were not a part of the equation, I want you to name one time. Name one time you're playing a normal game, whether it's chimps or whatnot, and you had to use this tower. Like, bro, it's too expensive. And you know what? I get it. Back in the day, you just needed this guy to beat boss fights. But guess what? If the only way to beat a boss fight was to use a singular tower that had singular mechanic that most people needed monkey knowledge to unlock, that's not called good game design. That's called bad game design. All right, it's gonna be F, and it's never leaving this spot. I fucking hate this tower. F as well. No one uses this guy. F as well. No one uses this guy. S. If we're being honest, it's a very strong tower. The crossbats are very strong. The tier 4 is very strong, and it has a phoenix. Like, what am I supposed to do? The dude's got a phoenix. All right, and we're gonna go over it one more time and see if anything gets moved. Ace, nah, S tier, S tier, S tier. Farms are always S tier. Where's my last farm? Oh, okay. S tier now, just because of what its utility is. S tier because of damage. S tier, S tier. Cheap and strong, cheap and strong. Very strong. Money making, very strong. Very useful. Very strong buff. Very strong money making machine. Massive worldwide buff. I'm gonna rate this A tier actually. It's strong, but it's got weaknesses. Kylie Boomerang, very powerful. Inferno Ring, very powerful. Expensive as hell, but probably the strongest, one of the strongest ult towers in the game in terms of utility and what it does. S tier just because it's very cool, and also it's cheap. S tier, very cheap, does a lot. Alchemist has to be S tier. S tier because S tier, S tier, S tier, S tier. This might go. I might have to drag this down just because it's unrealistic for anyone to use it. But then that also applies to Dark Knight. However, the Legend of the Night. My bad. Don't sue me. Legend of the Night. I'll keep it here just because I want to keep Legend of the Night here. Look, I'm looking here. I don't see anything else I kind of want to move down. This guy doesn't belong in B tier. That's bullshit. I'm looking at the rest of these towers. There's no way you belong in B tier, and you're not better than these guys either. You have to be here. I'm sorry, dog. These two, I wish I could put them higher, but they're just so unrealistic, man. But then so is these two. So what the fuck do I do? Okay, I'm bringing you down to 8. I'm keeping you here just because your passive is probably the strongest passive in the game. Yeah, I'm cool with this low key. Obviously, there's probably like one or two changes, but I'm cool with this. This will go up. It's cheap. Does what it needs to do. Yeah, why not? It's got utility. All right, I think this is a good set. Obviously, like everything might be able to get moved one up or one down, but I don't think anything here is considered S tier except maybe this guy, and I don't think anything here is considered non S tier. These guys, maybe this one could be S tier, just maybe. But I think, like I said, it's just you're never gonna really use the guy, and you don't want to use him in most events because you don't want to take pops away from um, Paragon monkeys, and also you don't really want to sometimes end waves too quickly if you have money generating things like snipers and whatnot. But yeah, that's about it. I might not even edit this, or maybe I will. Ooh, 30 minutes. What the fuck? All right, peace.